Welcome everybody back. Thanks so much for sticking around. We're well into this, well into our next to the last day. I want to welcome back Peter Yeo, Vice President for Public Affairs for the UN Foundation, to introduce our keynote speaker.
Great, thank you, Chris. And it is my great pleasure to introduce Bob Orr to you today. Bob is Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations for Policy Coordination and Strategic Planning. I've known Bob for many years because one of the things that one learns is when you work on UN issues and multilateral issues, it's a fairly small field. It should be larger, but Bob has been really the strong engine behind the UN's work in terms of policy, its global vision, its public-private partnerships, and has really taken a whole new vision about what the UN should be doing, what its role is, and how it's going to take not just donor countries to get stuff done and individual member states to get stuff done. It's going to take all of us as citizens. It's going to take the media. It's going to take private sector and member states and the leadership of the UN to produce real results. Bob has been at the United Nations since 2004. Before that, he was Executive Director of the Belfer Center at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, as well as the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. Also has served in the US government for the US mission to the UN, as well as the National Security Council. And he has a PhD from Princeton, from the Wilson School. So basically, he's an incredibly talented, hard-driving force for a strong UN, for a stronger American relationship with the UN. And most importantly, his father remains an active member of the Santa Barbara chapter of UNA. So this is all in the DNA. So without further ado, let me turn the stage over to Bob Orr. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, Chris and Mel. I'm going to tell Dad tonight that he got the cheer before I did today, so thank you very much for having me here today. You've heard a lot already in the last 24 or 48 hours, and you will be going up to do some very important work tomorrow up on Capitol Hill. What I thought maybe the best use of our time this afternoon could be, I want to pull back for just a minute and try to situate where I think we are in this moment in the UN's history, but also in its relationship to the United States, which is so crucial to where we are in the UN's history. If we look at the next 18 months or so, coming to the end of 2015, we are going to see an absolutely decisive moment for the United Nations. I'm not sure. I've given a lot of speeches over the years on the United Nations, and it always feels important. There's always something that is important. There is always something to be called out. There is a crisis. There is an opportunity. So it's not like it's unheard of that I would point at a point in time and say, this is crucial. But this time, it is different. And what is different is that we have many streams flowing into the same river at the same point. 2015 is, for various reasons, there are various political decisions that were taken about what's going to happen in 2015. The end of the Millennium Development Goal experiment and potentially its rebirth as something quite different, but with some continuity. It is also, at the end of 2015, the deadline that member states have given themselves for a new climate change regime that could reshape the way not just we do things, but the way everyone does things. And on top of the big development agenda, the big climate agenda, I think our peace and security and human rights agenda is at a crucial phase. If it is true that we almost always have one or two crises boiling, this is a time when we have multiple crises that have, if you will, an existential dimension. The fact that the G word, genocide, trips off the tongue a little too easily, that there are too many places at the same time where we really either are or could easily be confronting genocide in a short amount of time. At a time when the world's governments have, in many ways, spent themselves, spent their budgets, and are not feeling terribly ambitious. And so when it comes to genocide, maybe we can look the other way just a little bit longer. Maybe we don't have enough budget this year. Maybe someone else will take care of it if we don't. This confluence of events is extremely worrying given the facts of Syria, the facts of the Central African Republic, the facts of South Sudan, the facts of Sudan, the facts of, and I could keep going down the list. We have so many that there are pressures that are mounting. And all of these happen at the same time that we're trying to achieve the two big, positive, normative, agenda-setting, decisive moments on the development and the climate side. So it's an awful lot to handle coming through one institution, one place, one set of budgets. But that's a good thing. So as much as sometimes I think we all head out of the building in the evening or the late night or the early morning, very tired and a bit ragged at times, it is an excellent time to be a part of the United Nations and the broader United Nations community because we are needed. And there's nothing like being needed. And I think here, I'd like to just pause before diving into a few of those issues that I've highlighted to say that is exactly why you are needed. The institution is fragile. It's thin. If you look at the number of people and the size of our budgets, we are not up to all the challenges I just named. Unless we have the reserve, the political reserve, the financial reserve, the social mobilization reserve represented by citizens all over the world. And no more needed than in this country. As Peter mentioned, I'm proud that my father is a member of UNA and an active member of a chapter out in California. It is a huge difference for the organization that wherever we go, there are chapters around the world. But it is in this town where that can take a special difference. We need your voices. We need what you will be doing tomorrow. Peter Yo is one of the best people to work Capitol Hill I have ever seen. Peter Yo cannot do this alone. We need the citizens of the United States to rally behind all of these pieces of the agenda individually, but also collectively. That no one can take for granted this fragile institution called the United Nations. And why do I call it fragile? I don't like calling attention to the fact that it's fragile. I say it's fragile because it rests, as it always has, on political foundations. It rests on collective will of governments that often don't agree with each other, and if they can cut a deal and leave the UN holding the bag, so be it. So from its inception, the UN has been a bit of a political football. But that's what we have to do. We have to balance all the interests out there. We have to build coalitions on a daily basis around each of our difficult agenda items. But what the opportunity of 2015 gives us is we have to build a coalition of coalitions not only around each individual issue, but around this unique and valuable institution called the United Nations. Because you can't hit it on one side and then ask it for things on the other, even though a lot of people that you will see tomorrow often do that. Blame the UN for something over here. Oh, but yeah, we need it over there, so we'll fund a little bit, we'll help a little bit. We actually need the whole UN. We need the idea of the UN. We need the values of the UN. We need the norms of the UN. We need the capacity of the UN. We are deployed in all these most difficult places. We are the sensing network that tells us when we are on the verge of a genocide and that calls out for action. But before I get into any of those specific issues, I just wanted to give a quick pullback on this 2015 moment, because it is huge opportunity. You heard from Tom Pickering today, one of my professional mentors. So you can't do much better than Tom for talking about Ukraine, for talking about Syria. He probably covered a lot of other things, I'm guessing. But I would like to spend a few minutes on the post-2015 development agenda and on the climate change deal that we need next year, because these will change our global economy and our global politics in some fundamental ways, and fundamentally for the better. And boy, if we think we need some good news in this part of the world, try traveling to a lot of the places that the Secretary General and I have been in the last month, and the UN looks not only like it's needed, but it is desperately needed in the Middle East, in different parts of Africa, in South America, in Europe, in Asia. The post-2015 development agenda is a huge opportunity. I don't think anyone who initially helped to create the MDGs had any idea how big they would become. MDGs, a set of alphabet soup letters, was never destined to move the politics of any country in and of itself. Having a set of letters and calling something Millennium Development Goals never really was predestined to catch on politically, but it did. And governments around the world have reorganized their priorities, have reorganized their spending, have focused, have prioritized in a way that governments generally don't. Societies have prioritized in ways that societies generally don't. Businesses have prioritized in a way businesses generally don't. So the MDGs have been a phenomenally successful experiment. And we have to see that to a very positive conclusion in 2015. We are not going to give up one day of the Millennium Development Goals. We are going to drive every single day until December 31st, 2015, to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, because they have been so powerful at mobilizing so many. We need them, and we need to show it can be done. So we are fully mobilized. So please don't stop talking MDGs, even though I accuse them of being alphabet soup. It is an experiment that is not only live and vibrant, it is essential for what's happening out there. And just to give you a taste of why this drive to the finish line is so important. 3 years ago, the Secretary General looked at the MDG space and said, we've made so much progress in so many areas. Where haven't we made progress? And he looked at that geographically, and parts of Africa were the main areas we need to focus on. But he also looked at the different MDGs and saw women's and children's health lagging near the back of the pack. And given all of the analysis that women's and children's health is central to the entire development equation, it's central to the entire economic equation, central to the political equation, central to the social equation, how could we allow those to be at the back of the pack? So he asked all of the key health players inside the UN system and outside. What do we need to do? And everyone over the course of about a year came to a conclusion that women's and children's health, and particularly the maternal and child health MDGs, could be accelerated dramatically if we just did a few key identifiable things. And with prioritization, and with lifting up to the political masters at the UN, to the member states, we were able to get a focus on women's and children's health we had not previously had. We got different communities to start working with each other that previously had argued they were in favor of this approach, or this group of children as opposed to that group of children. We got an agreement. And with agreement and prioritization, we have started to bend the curve on women's and children's health over the last 3 years in a remarkable way. Not only are they no longer at the back of the MDG train, they are, as the Secretary General called on 3 years ago, they are moving up towards becoming the engine of the MDG train. So focus matters, the political focus as well as the financing focus. So this kind of approach to really target and then build a massive coalition around it can make a huge difference. And Peter in his introduction mentioned that I've been working a lot on public-private partnerships. One way that we have been able to bend the curve is broadening out the base of actors that are working with us on women's and children's health. UNA chapters around the world are working with us on women's and children's health. Businesses are working with us on women's and children's health. NGOs, finance institutions, as well as all the traditional donors and some non-traditional donors. As we have invested, we have seen returns. And I will tell you that a few years ago, having a conversation with the likes of Bill Gates about MDGs was a difficult conversation, very uncomfortable. He wanted to focus on health, not on these things called MDGs. But as he is a data-driven guy, we said, look at the data. Look at these things called MDGs. Look at what's happening, how they've made a difference. And Bill Gates and Melinda Gates are two of the biggest fans now of the Millennium Development Goals. Data-driven, facts on the ground driven. And it's not just Bill and Melinda Gates. We are now talking to wealthy people around the world to look at their own societies and follow the Gates' example. Invest in your people. Invest in the MDGs. Invest at home or invest abroad. Save as many lives as you can, as fast as you can. And this approach is having an effect. The Secretary General and I were both in China just, 2 weeks ago. We were in Shanghai, one of the most vibrant cities in the world today. Growing wealth evident at every turn. We went to a health center that had just been built. It was in the process of being opened. And I'm telling you, I would like to have been born in this health center. I would like to have my children born in this health center. And we got up to one wall as we were doing the walkthrough, and it said, this health center is based on the UN's global strategy for women's and children's health. The Secretary General's strategy. And the Secretary General looked at this and he said, did you put this here just for me? And the head of the health center said, absolutely not. You called, and all the UN experts called, for an integrated strategy to look at women and children together, not separately. To look at prenatal as well as postnatal care. To look at the whole woman, not just parts of the woman. And so this woman, this doctor who was the head of this health facility, said, your strategy laid all that out. And the UN, you can't do better than that. I hope it's okay that we built this hospital, this facility on your principles. And he very humbly said, oh, of course it's okay. But later that day, we went and sat down with Chinese business leaders, Chinese civil society, Chinese journalists, and said, this is your agenda too. It's not just your government. It's just not the Shanghai municipality. It's your whole society. And we don't want you to just do it in China. Start here, do it here. Help the poor people, the many poor people who remain in China. But think about all the things you could apply in other parts of the world, including in Africa. And they said, as a group, yes, we will. So there are incredible coalitions out there still to be mobilized. MDGs, yes, 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 drive to the finish line. But we will have a successor regime. We don't know what it will look like yet. The Secretary General has been asked. He will present a synthesis report this fall, which will draw from the member state debates to date. And by the end of next year, we will have something new. It will probably be called Sustainable Development Goals. Based on the agreements to date, I would hazard a guess that they will be universal for the first time, not just applying to the poorest countries, but applying to people all over the world, including in this country. So if you're poor in this country, you're not left out anymore. And everyone will have to commit to focus not only on faraway places and faraway people, but people close to home as well. I think there will be a strong focus on not just poverty reduction, but on poverty elimination. This is powerful. It is possible. The sense of possibility is palpable that in our lifetimes, we could eliminate poverty. And not just in your lifetimes. I'm looking at some of the young folks in the crowd here. Not just in yours. Some of us with gray hair and everything else, in our lifetimes, we could end poverty. Talk about exciting. That's not something we could say 10 or 20 years ago. And this is not just fantasy, folks. Look at the numbers, data-driven. It's happening. Where we focus, where we drive, and where we are motivated, and where we bring these coalitions together, we can do it. So keep an eye on this. The SDGs, or whatever it ends up being called, will have the MDGs embedded in them, so I can promise you no one's giving up on the MDGs, not this year, not next year, and not after 2015. We will finish the MDGs and more as part of the new regime. But I'd really like to finish them by the end of next year. So I like being a little ambitious. So keep the pressure on, keep the focus on. Just a quick word about climate change. We will not achieve MDGs, SDGs, or much of anything else on our agenda, human rights-based or security-based, peace-based, if we continue to allow the travesty of climate change to continue unabated. This problem is the problem that affects every single piece of the UN's agenda. When the Secretary General is asked, why have you given such high precedence to climate change? He said very simply, it affects everything we're trying to do, and it affects it today. It's not tomorrow. We used to talk about we need to do this for our grandchildren or our great-grandchildren, and then it was for our children. Folks, it's for us today as well as all future generations. Climate change is impacting everyone, everywhere, in ways you would not believe. As a UN official, I am privileged to travel all over the world. But the burden of that travel is that I see what's actually happening out there. And when you put the data points together, when you go to small Pacific islands that are literally going underwater, and talking to parents who, when you ask them about climate change, they say, well, I don't know exactly what's causing it, but the sea levels are coming in every night into our village, and we just have to make sure to scoop all the kids off the ground so they don't drown, and get them up onto a bed, something higher, so they don't drown. And it's not just in tiny Pacific islands. Lima, Peru, where we will have the climate change negotiations this December, the second largest desert city in the world, is flooded every year with all the raging waters that come roiling out of the Andes. I care about this a lot because I studied in Peru many years ago. And the idea of Lima being flooded every year is a bit mind-boggling. And then guess what? After all the floods rock Peru for a number of years here, then they will have nothing. No water will come out of the Andes because the ice will have all melted. What to do with a city of 10 million people when your water's gone? Cairo is the biggest desert city in the world. In the news today. What will Cairo do when the Nile doesn't flow? So we have implications, peace and security, development, you name it, that climate change is affecting today. Here I am very hopeful. Nothing is guaranteed, but the Secretary General has done a great service for the world by focusing relentlessly on climate change. When he came to office in 2007, the climate talks were flat on their back. They weren't going anywhere. And when people said, "Are you sure you want to prioritize this agenda? It's not really showing any promise here." He said, "Yes, that's exactly why I want to focus on it." And focus on climate change has been difficult. This is not an easy issue. At least in some places it's not an easy issue. And we're sitting in the town where it's the hardest issue. But I will tell you, we cannot turn away from it. And as much as the Obama administration is doing on this, Congress will have its say. Congress needs to face up to this as well. So when you talk with people tomorrow, whether you call it climate change, whether you call it rational energy policy, whether you call it good development policy, whether you call it good budget policy, don't waste a lot of money on things you don't have to waste it on, that if you just dealt with the problem, you could save not millions, not billions, but ultimately trillions of dollars of American taxpayer money. That is a darn good investment. So I know it's a sensitive issue in this town. I know it's a sensitive issue a stone's throw from here on Capitol Hill, but we can't turn away from it. And as an American serving at the UN, I can tell you it matters when Americans talk about this and focus on this. We want everyone to talk and focus on it. But the world does want U.S. leadership on this. The world expects U.S. leadership on this. The world knows it can't do it without the United States. That's U.S. financing, that's U.S. leadership, political leadership. That is U.S. technology. It is U.S. mobilization. Now, I want to end with this because I think climate change, while it is an immense challenge, is a huge opportunity. The Secretary General will be having a truly unprecedented summit this September on climate change in New York. More global leaders will come in one place at one time to focus on climate change than has ever happened in history. And those leaders are coming with things and ideas and commitments that they have never come with before. We don't know the full scale. We don't know exactly what each leader will say, but I can tell you the politics of climate change are shifting, and they're shifting because everyone sees what's happening to them at home. No one can turn away from it anymore. So the ground of this issue is shifting. Now we need to make it happen and turn the ship as fast as we can here. Because every year we delay, the cost goes up in lives and the cost goes up in dollars and euros and yen and every possible currency. I will tell you that when the United States comes to the table and leads, they will not be alone. China is moving. The new Prime Minister in India has already made some exciting statements on this. Europe, despite its budget crises, is not giving up on this issue. And in the Middle East, the home of fossil fuels, the place where everyone says is kind of the graveyard of the climate change discussion, in the Middle East, the Secretary General and I just a few short days ago visited some of the most cutting-edge solar technology plants in the heart of oil country. Fuel being created by the sun, cheaper than the oil being pumped out of the ground. They can see the future. Why can't we? So much is happening. So while I started with all the challenges and the kind of sense that it's a bit overwhelming some days when you go to work and you just don't want to open that newspaper, or at least the second or the third page, because you're just afraid what else you'll see there, the fact is a huge amount is happening. I would just like to close before opening for discussion with this sense that we need you. The United Nations is nothing but the sum total of its members. And I don't mean just the governments that are our board of directors. The United Nations Charter begins, "We the peoples." And governments will not act without their peoples asking them or demanding of them that they act. So what you're doing here and what you'll be doing tomorrow matters. And if you do it here, it gets noticed elsewhere. So be proud of what you're doing. I'm very excited to see the number of you in this room that have been at this for years and are still at it. Thank you. Those of you in the room who can't have been at it for years because you were probably, sorry, I keep looking at this table. I'll look a different direction. Those of you who probably the number of years back were in grade school, the combination of young and young at heart in this room is perfect. Use your wisdom, use your youth, use your persuasiveness, but use it now because we need it. Thank you very much.
We have some time for questions, and please identify yourself by name and by chapter or region. Microphones are coming around. Please use the microphone. Keep it brief. Thanks.
Hi, I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I have a kind of pedestrian question because when I go back home, we're going to be doing a program on the post-2015 goals. And I know people are going to ask, how is the consensus that is going to be presented to the General Assembly, how is it determined what the goals actually will be? What is the process? I know they're saying that we all have input, but the final choice, who gets the final choice?
That is not a pedestrian question at all. I think that borders on philosophy, actually. Let me try to be as simple in my answer, and it may simplify reality a little bit too. The ultimate answer is the governments will have to adopt by consensus the new regime. And that means 193 governments will have to adopt some document. How we get to that document is not at all yet totally clear. The signposts that we know, there's a working group of governments that has been working on this for a number of months. They're down to 17 different focus areas. We're still trying to get to shrink and tighten and hone. This fall, the Secretary General will produce a synthesis report, which should hopefully hone further yet. And then governments will have between this fall and next fall to go through a political process to adopt a set of goals. But that's what we know. Politics being what they are, and legislation and the legislative process being what it is, many things could happen. What I am very comfortable saying is that this incredible process, which quite frankly scared the daylights out of me 2 years ago, the idea that there would be so much input coming from so many places around the world, I thought there is no possible way we're going to get to a set of goals. We have been democratic in the extreme, and in the end, you could end up with so many voices that you couldn't make sense of it. But what has been beautiful about the process is from all parts of the world and different kinds of constituencies, we've been hearing a lot of the same things. So in the end, I'm relatively sure that we will get a defined, clear, limited number of goals that will represent not only the great inputs that have come in, but this political process that will be forced to decide. I use the word priorities and prioritization many times today. It's because that is my watchword for all of our member states. Please prioritize, please focus, because when we focus, we actually get it done. So it's going to be a bit messy, but I think we're going to get there.
In the back and then here.
Yes, I'm Karen Mulhauser from the National Capital Area. I live right here in DC. And you mentioned a G word, and you mentioned an opportunity. And I want to suggest another G word and another opportunity, because next year is also the 20th, it's Beijing plus 20. And the relevance of gender equality around the world is going to be celebrated then, and that may be an opportunity. And also, it is the 15th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325, and a number of us are involved in civil society working group to advance our own country's national action plan as well as relate to others. And so I just wonder if you're aware of any thinking about how UN Women is going to be integrating the gender issues next year with the new development goals.
Great question, Karen. Gender is the G word we like. It is, I think, not trite to say that while I talked about climate change as the cross-cutting threat that endangers our entire agenda, gender is the cross-cutting opportunity that empowers our entire agenda. Whether it's climate change or development or security, where we have succeeded at good gender policies and mobilizing women and bringing the full range of capacities to bear on the problems, we have made huge progress. I will just tell one quick anecdote about where we are at the UN today, because UN Women is still a young organization. It's well led, it's mobilizing, but we need more than just one organization. We need the whole width and breadth of the UN to take on gender in every aspect, in human rights, in peace and security, in development, in humanitarian affairs, in climate change. And I will tell you the Secretary General is advocate number one of this approach. He joked with me the other day as he appointed a number of additional senior women. He said, when you were talking with me about gender when I started, did you think you had become an endangered species? No, I didn't, but I welcome becoming an endangered species at the UN. The number of appointments of senior women, and now increasingly women at mid-levels to join the very robust group of women at junior levels, makes the UN a very different place than when I started a decade ago. And I will tell you, walking the walk is the best way to go talk the talk out there. The UN is now walking the walk. We are putting great women in all positions at the UN. The first female head of a military peacekeeping mission really sends a signal. Women as chief negotiators in conflicts where women are the principal victims really sends a signal. And it's not just signaling, it makes a difference on the ground. And so I will tell you, this kind of quiet revolution afoot at the UN is helping to drive this agenda. And Phumzile is a great leader. I didn't envy anyone to have to follow Michelle Bachelet. Anyone who knows President Bachelet knows that that was a tough position to take, to follow such a great founding leader. Phumzile is up to the challenge, and she is doing a fantastic job. So we have a good instrument to focus, but we have a leader in the Secretary General that is leading this across the whole UN, and it is making a difference. So we need to use those anniversaries well. We need to mobilize, but recognize that this remains probably our biggest tool in gender empowerment that we have to achieve our full agenda. Thank you.
We have one more question.
Thank you for your comments, Dr. Orr. My name is Joey Hensler. I'm from the Greater Kansas City chapter, and I grew up in Kansas, where climate change is a naughty word. So I was wondering how we can make sure that after walking away from New York, the resulting treaty, how we can make sure the United States is a signing member of that treaty.
Thank you. Coming from Kansas City, that is a wonderful question. It would be good from anybody, but it's even better from you. I recognize that the politics of this are harder for you and people like you sitting in the heartland. If you're from California or New York or even Florida, Maryland, you know, there are politics everywhere, but there are enough people and enough interests and enough people looking at their coastlines and looking at their wallets to see that they have interests. What is interesting is that the politics are changing in the heartland in many ways. The wind revolution is on. It is something that one can see not too distant in the future, where the cost curves on solar power in sunny parts of the United States, including in the South, where the politics of this issue have never been terribly good, where in fact we will see anyone who wants a vibrant economy in the United States will be looking towards solar and wind and not towards new wells. And that's something that we can't wait for. We have to push it out. But here, I'm very practical. We've never said we have to go to 100% renewables tomorrow. That's not cost effective. That's not good policy. But likewise, sitting on kind of a normal growth curve, slow growth curve of renewables is likewise not good policy. We need to accelerate our use of renewable energy. We need policies that accelerate it. That will help the United States remain competitive economically. So you don't have to be a UN-loving, democratic, and I could fill in a lot of other things there, to think that this is smart policy. I can talk to the most conservative senator, member of Congress, and make a very compelling case that in U.S. interests, in economic interests, in national security interests, we have to accelerate this energy revolution. And it's on our terms if we do it now. Wait 5 years, it is not on our terms. The technologies are out there. If the United States wants to move slowly, so be it. Others will move faster, and the United States economy can suffer. If you would like that, Mr. Senator, Mr. Member of Congress, Mr. Governor, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor, hopefully, Madam Governor. But it is a case that we all need to study up and we all need to make. We need to look at those cost curves, and we need to be unafraid of walking into those offices and saying, this is in our interests. Don't follow old ways, because if you fall out of step here, we will suffer, the citizens of the United States. Then you can make the case on moral grounds for the global interest. It's all true. But you can make a narrow, self-interested case that is just as compelling, and for some people, much more compelling. So get comfortable with both cases and make them both, and don't hesitate. And good luck in Kansas City. We need you.
Well, we're going to tell your mom and dad that you made them proud. And on behalf of all the members of UNA USA, it's my honor to give you a small gift of our appreciation, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for staying this late in the day, especially.
We stand adjourned. We'll see you at the UN Foundation for our 3 breakouts this evening. Thank you.